Hey, we are live from Inkarnate Town. Today we are embarking on an epic quest to create an epic mountain city with the Watercolor City style. So welcome everybody. Super exciting. I love making cities. They are time consuming. As they say, Rome was not created in a day. So first episode, we are going to be covering city planning. That's the way that I plan out my cities. Certainly not the only way, but my way. And then also we're going to be covering terrain, how to place down the terrain with the shape and the line tools. So super excited about that. Now, before we kind of jump into the stream, first, if I could just, a little staticky. Okay, good catch. I'll go ahead and fix those issues. Just one moment while I fix that. Okay. Is it still staticky? Let me know if it's still feeling staticky. I think we fixed that. Afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for letting me know about that. We'll just make sure that the audio is working good. Much better. Awesome. Great. Glad to hear that. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, if you hear any more, let me know. We can fix that. So again, we're going to be doing city planning and the terrain. Now, before we jump into that, first, if I could direct you over to the chat, there's some links in the chat that you should definitely join. If you haven't yet, join our Discord server. Incredible community. You're going to find your map making skills grow exponentially by interacting with the members of our Discord community. So absolutely join them. First time chatter, both of you, welcome. All three of you, awesome. So glad. Got some first time chatters in here. If you haven't noticed in our notifications, we have the stream calendar out for July. If you're not finding the kind of content that you want to see on our channel, you should click that stream request for the canny and then just leave us what kind of streams that you would like to see on the channel. We listen, okay? That last link is the YouTube channel. After we finish doing a stream, we upload that stream to YouTube, and that link is the channel that we go to. So definitely go check out that as well, okay? Let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, for me, whenever I'm planning out a big project, with a battle map, it's not quite as big, it's just one spot. But with a city, it is a massive, it becomes a massive endeavor, right? In reality, a city is a massive endeavor. So when you think about it and putting together a city on a map with Inkarnate, it is going to require some planning. And the way that I do city planning is I ask some very basic questions first before I start extrapolating, because what happens is that city building, you can get lost in how many blocks you want and the population and all this stuff. And so the way to kind of organize your thoughts and to kind of get the city planning rolling is that I ask myself a series of questions. Now, there's a lot of questions, but I stick with these particular six right here. And for city planning, the first question I ask myself is, how big is this city? Okay, and by big, I mean population. And the bigger the population is, generally, the bigger the square feet that a city will be, unless you've got some verticality going on like we have in the mountains here. Now, I'm going to go with a population of 2,500 people. Now, that may not seem a lot for modern times, but we're talking about fantasy, right? And in fantasy, which is kind of based off of, shall we say, based off of medieval, then 250,000 would have been a lot of people in one area. Now, of course, with fantasy, you can stretch that to how many you want. But just remember that when you think about massive cities, it's going to be a lot more work. Okay, so don't worry about trying to make a city that looks like there's millions. Start with something smaller first, especially if it's your first time making a city, and then you can kind of build your way up as you go through the skills to putting it up. The second question is where is the food and water? Water sources and food can come from multiple things. You have rivers, wells, lakes, crops. It can come from commerce or trade, etc. Lots of ways. My answer to that question for this particular video is going to be an aquifer and an aqueduct. We're probably going to put the headwaters to a river or a lake in the mountain, and that's going to be filled up with rainwater and snow melt, and then an aqueduct is going to go from that mountain lake and go into the city. So that's where water is going to come from. Food is going to come from terrain. It's really hard to grow a sustainable or large yields crops on a mountain because there isn't a lot of space, flat space for you to grow crops. And it doesn't make much sense to grow a crop at the base of a mountain because the shadow of the mountain will minimize the amount of sunlight that your crop was going to need. So it makes sense to have trade be the major form of getting the lots of food into the city. Okay. That next question, number 3, is the governing structure. There's a lot of governing structures, and you can go check out history or other campaigns to figure out what kind you want. There are representative, oligarchic, dictatorship, democratic, you name. There's a whole different list of governing structures. And I'm going with a parliamentary structure. And the great thing about choosing a government structure before you build the city is because this might describe the, or be a part in the layout of the city. Where is the governing bodies at, the governing buildings? Is there a parliamentary district? Is there going to be a castle because there's a king? Is there going to be an emperor? Is there a palatial palace? I mean, a palatial house? I mean, all these kind of things. So knowing the governing structure will kind of help you to kind of understand the structure of the city, where different districts are, things like that. So, and a lot of these questions are going to overlap, by the way. Question number 4, what is the religion or religions? Okay, now if you only have one religion, that's great. Maybe you have 2. Maybe there's a conflict between the 2 religions, like some kind of religious civil war or whatnot. Okay, you can, in religions, they vary from solar, lunar. Are they out? Do they worship the elements? Do they worship war, a god of war? Do they celebrate commerce? Do they worship whatever it might be? And for me, because they live in a mountain, and in the mountain there's not much access to food, I'm going to say that they're going to worship a god of commerce, because that's the way that they get their food, is through commerce and trade. And I'm going to have a goddess of water, because they get their water from an aqueduct or a mountain lake. And so we'll have another part of the religion facet will be this water god. And what I'm gonna try to do is have it to be where the elites kind of worship more. The elites in this city worship more of the food god, and the more poorer people who have public access to the water will end up worshiping more towards the water goddess. So all of that will play a role. Do I have a religious sector, a district, things like that? So these questions we're already seeing a whole bunch of ideas for districts that are going to be in our city by asking these questions. That 5th question, what kind of culture is there, or cultures? And that really depends on the races of people that live there. Your environment. Culture is generally greatly influenced by your surroundings. So because you live in a mountain, there might be some elements of culture that have lived around, meaning the mountains, or a culture around drinking water or cleaning your feet, whatever that culture might be. And I generally overlap culture with religion and government structure. Those things all kind of overlap each other, because there seems to be a mix between them. Never are they kind of separated in their own fields. And then for this one, for culture, I'm going to be focusing mostly about water, food access, commerce, and then probably a couple other elements as well that we'll include into the culture. That last question, is there commerce? That means trade. Are there going to be markets? Is there going to be trade guilds, shops, blacksmiths, glass blowers, you name it, the whole thing that you require for an infrastructure? How does that play a role into the commerce of your world? Okay, so again, trades, markets, guilds, shops, whatever. I'm going to have trade guilds, and those are going to be pretty much controlled by the elite section. So all the leaders of the trade guilds are going to be more in the elite part, while the more poorer people are going to be maybe working at maybe like a mine. And it kind of makes sense, right? Where there's a mountain city, so there's probably going to be mines that go into the mountain, and that's where a lot of these trade guilds get a lot of their wealth, is from the ore and the materials that they see and they're getting from those mines. That's about it for those 6 questions. Now again, a lot of these questions will explode into like several more questions, and that's okay. Just stick with some basic questions that you have. These 6 work great for me, and then you can expand on them as you go. The beautiful thing about a city is that you don't have to have 200 pages of information about your city. What you can do is let your city grow and evolve naturally. As you slowly grow each section, more history will grow, more history will come into play. As the more structures that you add, the more ideas for districts will come. So don't worry about this huge planning process. Start with the basic questions and allow the history, allow all the things of your city to kind of grow naturally over time. Just like a city, when it's so large, it takes time for that city to grow. right? It's not like builders just said, we're going to build this city in 3 years and it's going to be done. Cities grow over time as it becomes more and more populated because of trade or religion or food or whatever it might be. As it grows, the city grows, and we're going to show that growth process as we build the city with Inkarnate. So I'm excited for that as well. So those questions have been answered. Now we need to talk a little bit about scale, because scale plays a huge role in how big that city is going to be. So let's go ahead and check out scale here. Now, the way that I approach scale is by averages, okay? So one house or structure can equal 5 people. Now, some of the city stamps are a block, and they might have a series of buildings in them. You just multiply the number of buildings times 5. This has 9 buildings. 9 times 5 is 45 people. Now, remember, this is an average. Some buildings might have 10 people in them, especially if you're in a slum or you have a large family. There might be 20 people in a house with people living on top of each other to pay for exorbitant prices at a slum. So it's just an average. But this will help to kind of give you a guide on kind of knowing when you're getting close to that population number that you're looking for. And of course, when it comes to scale, if you're depending on that number, if you have a village and the number is 5, then if you want a village of 45 people, then you just need to have 9 buildings and you can bring the scale up, right? But if you're having a city of 250,000, then there's going to be way more buildings, and you're going to have to scale them way, way, way down so that way you can fit more buildings. So the trick to scale is just knowing that if you're going to have a large city, you're going to have to scale down your stamps. If you're just making a simple village with maybe 50 buildings or 100 buildings, then you can scale the stamp up. Okay, so just remember kind of that rule that the more buildings that you have, you'll have to scale the stamps down. If it's just a village, you can scale them up. So remember that important rule. And I'll go over also how to keep track of how many buildings you have, and then keeping track of the population. Remember, one of the big things is that the mix between fantasy and realistic. You don't have to hit 250,000 people to make it look like you have, let's see here, I think about 20,000 buildings is what I would need, or about 25,000 buildings is how many I would need to make 250,000 people using a metric of 5 per house. So again, an average. If you have maybe 10,000 or maybe 7,000 buildings, that might be still would pass for 250,000, because you're trying to create the illusion of a large population. You don't have to be super realistic like a satellite image where you have to put down the exact number of houses to reach that population limit. Use it as a guide. You can work around it, because trust me, do you know how hard it's going to be to place 25,000 pieces of stamps down? Probably not going to happen. So try to give yourself a little bit of stretch, a little bit of room, okay? Because that many houses is going to drive you crazy. So, but again, if you want it to be super realistic, you can go with that instead. It's up to you. You just need to figure that out for yourself, okay? All right, let's go ahead and do the next step before we go into terrain. Because I answered all those questions, I was able to start to put together the city blocks that we mentioned a little earlier when we were looking at city planning. Oopsie, I meant to say 250,000. There's 100,000 there, but well, you'll know what I mean. 250,000. So there's going to be a guild and a market district, because we mentioned that commerce and trade are important things. There's going to be a parliament district, because we mentioned that the government system currently is a parliamentary system. We can add some history in there. I draw inspirations from Rome sometimes for some of my stuff. Perhaps this city was once ruled by a king. The people were tired of the dictatorship of kings, and so they overthrew the king and created a parliamentary system so that at least poor people might have a little bit more say. So before that, there was a kingship. Now there's a parliamentary system. Of course, there's still elites. There's still very wealthy people gaining from the trade guilds, but at least there's like access to water and there's room for people to live. There's also going to be a prefecture. Because there's so many people in a city, there's generally going to be just a little bit of crime. And when it comes to crime, you're going to want some kind of prefecture or a prefect. That is going to be like a police All right, so you want to have maybe some kind of police force or policing force that's going to keep the city streets safe. It's going to make sure that people aren't being robbed, murdered, and those kind of things. So we're going to have a prefecture district. We're also going to have an elite district. Again, the owners of the trade guilds will act as our where the elite district is. There's also going to be some slums. That's where our miners are going to be working. And if there's going to be some slums, then there's going to be a mining district as well. Okay, so now these are just 7 of the districts that I wanted to put down. That you could put as many as you want, but just know that because we're working with the number of 250,000 people, you can't have so many districts to where it kind of the number outdoes the number of residential. So when you have a large number like that, it means the majority of those people are going to be living in a residential section. So what you'll do is you'll create all of these districts first, and then you'll create residential last. You'll create your slums, you'll create your middle class section, you'll create this. So the trick is that you'll start with the districts first, and then you'll build all the residential around those districts. And those residential districts are determined by their proximity to the other districts. So obviously you'd want the slums maybe close to the mining district. Your elite district would be close to maybe the temple or the guild and market districts, right? Because that's where the elites kind of own out. Your parliamentary district would be maybe close to your trade guilds, so that way those people who go for commerce can also go over to the government section as well. So proximity to each group is determined by, what is next to it. Is the trade guild next to this or that? And I try to keep these relatively close to each other, spanning them out too much, because you want the people within the city to be able to access the guild, the temple, and the parliament, and those sections easily. So we'll have to talk about organizing those together. Okay, now that I've kind of covered most of the city planning, we can go right into building terrain, okay? So let's go ahead and just remove this, and we'll jump into terrain here. Now, with city terrain, the way that I would build a mountain, especially at this top perspective, is to first create where the base of the mountain is, and then where it touches the ground. And then from there, we're going to build upward. In all of the streams that I do, I always mention this: you build from the ground up, just like in reality, right? You build from the ground up. So with this mountain is we'll create the shape, the base of the mountain first, and then we're going to create a whole bunch of lines of cliffs to create the upward part of the terrain. So let's go ahead and do that first. You're going to go to that line shape, you're going to click stamp, you're going to go into the stamp catalog, and you're going to want to pick a type of cliff that's going to work well for you. And any of them work here. You have some sand cliff. Let's say that this mountain is in the desert. There's that sand cliff, the red cliff. Say that it's maybe away from the desert. There's some big cliffs here. Maybe there's some grass. So there's a lot of different cliffs that you can kind of choose from. I'm going to go, I think I'll probably go with red. I think red is a kind of a nice color. So we'll start with this, and we can change it as we go. And what we'll do is, again, we're going to create the base first. So switch it to your pen, and I'll do it with the pen first, but then I'll also switch to the mouse so you can kind of see the difference. And the base of the mountain is, I'm going to go with kind of not perfectly horizontal. I'm going to add a little bit of an angle to it. I'm going to start from the right, going to that left, and I'm going to create the base of the mountain. I'm going to make sure that it's facing the right way. You can flip this. If you're not certain which one is the right way, it's not too bad. There's a little bit of a drop shadow. So this kind of represents the base of the stamps, while this is the top. So just kind of remember, if you get confused on what's top and bottom with these cliffs, there's a little bit of a drop shadow that you can see there. So that's how you know the top from the bottom. So that's that first step. So you've picked that. This is the shape that you want to go with. And then you can change the size of it. Maybe I want the scale to be larger. You could also change the stamp. Maybe you want it to be gray instead, like this. Maybe you want to use, there should be some hill ones as well. Maybe you want to use one of these. There's this brown hill, a dirt hill here. So there's a lot of different kind of stuff that you can kind of choose from. It's really up to you. And then from there, you're going to want to start stacking a bunch of these lines together to create this illusion of pitch or angle as it goes up, okay? And what I'll generally do is I will create, I'll just use like the pen, the free draw, and I'll pick a color that I want to use, and I'll use it as kind of a guide, but I want the peak of the mountain. I'll draw the peak of the mountain, so I'll say a peak of a mountain right there, and then we'll put the lake there, and then maybe I'll put another peak right here like this that kind of just goes off screen. And so these are going to be the tops of the mountains, and then we can start to build stamps that go around that. So let's go ahead and go back, push it here. I'm going to copy, paste it, put another one here like this, stack it on. And I think I'll flip it as well, going the other way, so it's not mimicking it perfectly. It doesn't have to be perfectly lined up. There can be some space between them. It's just up to you. We'll put that there. And so now they have two there. Now I want to create another one. But this time I'm going to have it be a different shape than the first one. So you're kind of getting the general idea. Then I want to create another one right here. Let's go ahead and create this top one up here. And then as you're kind of going up, you're creating the slope here. Now, if you're not satisfied with watercolor cities, just, you can use any stamp that you want to act, but you get the general idea. What you're doing is you're starting with the base and then moving the cliffs going up as it gets to the peak. Now, of course, you'll have to do a lot of editing, so you'll have to like flip to make sure all the cliffs are facing in the right directions. Just remember, if you get confused about that, just look for the drop shadow. Look for that drop shadow. And then we'll do some finagling. I'm going to have the stamps at the bottom be just a little bit bigger, and then I'll make the stamps here at the very top just a little bit smaller. I'm going to vary the sizes because it doesn't look natural when all of the stamp scales are exactly the same. So kind of changing that up and making them different sizes kind of helps to give it a more natural feel to it. Okay, now that I've kind of put that together, I'm going to fill it with the add mode of the mask tool. And what you can do is just take the add mode, use a circle brush, and just kind of go in. I'm just going to fill up the whole thing like this. Okay, like that. I can remove those red lines. I don't need them anymore. And I'm probably going to do a little bit more editing with the cliffs. And I'll probably change the background as well. I think what I'll use is use a gray color. Foreground, fill, there we go. Okay. Now you're not going to see a whole lot of, lot of shadowing or depth quite yet because we're just starting it. You'll do your shadowing for the depth. It's hard to tell which is the top and the bottom. Don't worry about that. We're going to get to that towards later in other episodes when we get to the shadowing part, because there's no point in putting down shadows until you have objects for shadows to interact with. So don't worry about light and shadow until later. All right. So let's go ahead and continue this. We're going to want to make sure that all the stamps are in the right layer. We want to put this up a layer. I want that on top of that. Put it up against this corner. That's where our mountain lake will be. And then we'll put an aqueduct. What I'll do is I'll probably change up the line work a little bit on this. I kind of feel like the line work is really harsh. So we can go bring the contrast down a little bit more, bring the brightness down a little bit. And I'm noticing we got the add mode right here. Here we go, that looks good. Okay, and then I'm gonna flip this around. Let's copy and paste this one and put it down again. Rotate it a little bit. And then let's boost the scale up on this one. And I think I'll add just a couple more stamps here to it. Just one moment. Another one right there. There we go. Okay. I think that looks good. Now, one thing you can do to kind of help with depth is to use contrast, okay? I'm not going to do any shadowing, but you can start with contrast to kind of get a general idea of depth. So stamps that are further down are darker. Stamps that are further up are brighter. The reason why is because when the sun, things that are higher up, there's less things obstructing the light rays from hitting it. So if you and you can also use that darkness to use a contrast against the stamps lighter. So things at the bottom darker, things at the top lighter. So we'll start with the first one. I'm going to bring the brightness down significantly, and then I'll select the second one and then bring the brightness down. And you're going to see that it's kind of I'm gradually changing the brightness of each one. So maybe I want to bring the brightness down on this one just a little bit. Not that one, the other one, my mistake. You got to find it first. Let's see here. This one's done, so I'll lock it. This one is done, so I will lock it. That will make it easier. So there it is. Little bit darker. But you're getting the general idea. Already you're seeing the contrast starting to take place with the darker to the lighter. And what I'll do is I'll just make this top one a little bit brighter. This is the very top, so a little bit brighter. This one right here, just a little bit brighter, not too much. This one up here, a little bit brighter. So this will kind of help to kind of get that contrast going, which will be very, very, very helpful. There we go. Okay. So that is kind of coming together. Let's just make sure that I touched everything here. Oopsie, not that. This, and then I'll put maybe, I might end up moving this a little bit, unlock everything. And I think I might grab everything and just kind of move it a little bit more this way. Oopsie, everything, there we go. It's going to move it a little bit more. I want some more space for the mountain. So more of the mountain should be on the screen. So we're just going to move it this way. There we go. That looks good. We're going to fill it back in. There we go. Just make sure that it's all filled in. There we go. Nice. Perfect. Okay. Just want to make sure. There we go. Great. Okay. Same thing too. You can use these textures to kind of show variation. So I can go in, bring the brightness down a little bit, and then kind of paint these sections a little bit darker right here if you want. Bring the brightness up a little bit. You can always change the brightness here a little bit. It's just, again, to kind of create this illusion of height. And then we'll bring the brightness up a little bit. Put this at the top here. There you go. Already just kind of getting the contrast down, which is going to help with making things seem like there's a little bit more depth. So let's make this a little bit brighter. Just keep going. I want it to be bright. This is kind of the tallest peak right here where that mountain lake is. There we go. Perfect. Okay. And then we're also going to make, let's go ahead and choose a darker green color. We're going to fill that for the background. Fill. Okay. At 74 changes, we'll quickly save and we'll keep going. Okay. All right. That part is putting together. You've got that terrain part, and we're going to add some more stuff to make the terrain match in with the stamps. And what I'll do is I usually use something that's going to transfer this dark line work to this flat kind of like texture right here. There's not much transition there. So using textures, especially alphas, is a great way to do that. So normally I just type in alpha, and then there should be a cracked ground alpha. If the cracked is not in here, that's fine. You can always move over to click Inkarnate and then just type in cracked, and you'll find some cracked textures. There's one from Battle Maps, but there's also one from, I believe it is from Watercolor Battle Maps. And because Watercolor Battle Maps and Watercolor Cities use a similar style, they work well together, but just know that the scale is totally different. With textures, it's pretty much okay. But with stamps, you have to be a little bit more careful. So just kind of remember that. But we're going to use this cracked ground to act as a way to keep some kind of transition. So if I just take this cracked ground like this, and where you put it is right wherever there is the line work of the mountain. So at the base of all this stuff, go ahead and put some cracked ground in there. Cracked ground here, that's going to put that together. A little bit more cracked ground here, cracked ground here. There we go. That looks good. And I think I will put maybe some more peaks and stuff as well in here. We got to make sure that there's tons of room for that city to fit in here. That's super important. You want to make sure that there's room. Just keep adding in the cracked ground around the edges here. Okay, that works just fine. So now we have that cracked ground there. The other thing that you can do to create more transition is to throw in this illusion of erosion. And so what you'll do is you go into Watercolor Cities. If there's no rocks in there, then you can always go to Battle Maps. But we'll go with these rocks right here. We're going to scale them down. And the way that you can see, just look at the line work, and then we're going to place a bunch of these on the ground as well. So just kind of place them here and there. And start with maybe some bigger stones first. And what I normally do is I put them in kind of clusters. It gives it a more natural look to it. Just place them at the base. This is all going to help with that transition because it looks kind of odd. And you will have to change the brightness of these as well because you see how bright they are. So there is that brightness thing. But one way that you can fix that is just by using the top layer for your shadows or using the shape tool, which is up to you. I'll place these rocks here. So those big ones are done. Then I can scale them down a little bit and then kind of create some smaller ones. Again, put them in clusters, put them around where the big ones are. Put some randos just floating around. And again, this is just there to kind of break up. It's just meant to kind of break up the transition between that texture and these stamps. Go, that's here. We'll add a little bit more here. All right, so the transition is working fine. I think overall that looks good. A lot of changes, so I'll quickly save. How much time do we have? 3:31. Oh, tons of time. We can continue working on the terrain, and then we'll do just a little bit of outlining of where a lot of the city is going to be. So you can always mark where things are going to be. So that we're going to go over that in just a moment. We'll let it save. We might add in just a couple more cliffs as well. Quickly let it save here. Thank you for watching. This is pretty fun. I really enjoy cities, but man, they are incredibly time consuming. And that's okay, because you know what? For a good result for a city, you got to put some time into it. There's no way that you're going to just work on it for 2 hours and you're going to have an epic city. It's going to take several sessions, several hour sessions for you to kind of put it together. And that's okay. That's not a big deal. You want to create a nice, believable, and yet fantasy-like city. Okay, I think for now we'll call it good on terrain because a lot of the stuff is going to be covered with city. So let's just use the shape tool to kind of mark, or not shape tool, but the line tool to kind of mark where a lot of the city is going to be. And I'm just going to go ahead and use this shape here. First, we're going to have where the lake is going to be. And the lake is going to be up here. That's going to be the water source. Now, there's going to be some aqueducts that are probably going to lead to the city as well. But first, we'll start with just the major sections. Like most of the city is going to be right in this area right here. This is where most of the city is going to be, in this space. You can also have some city elements up here. You can have some city elements up here. You can put some city elements down here. There's probably room for some districts that you can kind of place right here, and you can connect them with maybe walkways or bridges. And then if you want, you can also have some sections down here as well for the city. It's really up to you on how many sections you want, but there should be a larger section to put the majority of the residential stuff. So that larger section is probably where a lot of your residential is going to be. Okay. Now, I think for now, I probably won't go with a lot of this workout or this layout. I'll probably change a couple things up. I think this main area looks kind of weird. So I'll probably end up taking another stamp and probably making a little section that's going to cut it off. So we'll take this tool right here and we'll kind of create a little section right here like that. And then the city, copy paste this. One more, copy paste. We'll put that one right there. Okay, there we go. And then we'll remember to kind of put in some of those cracks and some stones as well. Oopsie, that is way too big. Down, there we go. About that size looks good. Okay, so a lot of the city is going to be kind of, oopsie, not that one, this one right here. A lot of the city is going to be right here like this. Much of the city. And what we'll do is we'll end up putting some walls right here. Let's go ahead and grab another color for this so I can kind of indicate. There'll be a wall right here in between here and a wall right here. So you can be gates right there if it's an entrance, or it can just be a wall. So if it's going to be just a wall, you'll probably put some fortifications there. And then Once you've kind of put the sections together, then you're going to want to create a route that goes to the the start of the city to the end of the city. So you could have it to where there is a winding kind of path that kind of leads into this section right here. This first section right here can probably just be maybe some barracks, or maybe where a some kind of where maybe one prefecture is. It's up to you, right? But some kind of entrance, and since it's a mountain going up, this will act as a good natural defense as well. Armies will have to go up these series of switchbacks to get up to that first section. From that first section, they'll have to travel to go into here, into this other section right here. We don't have to have that section there. If that's too small and doesn't make any sense, then just have the walkway go up into this next section. That's up to you, okay? And then from there, I want to be able to walk access to maybe these points, to these points. There needs to be access to get to the lake. So you could say that there's maybe a lake access here, access to get to this section right here. Maybe the elites are closest to that water section over there. And then also we want access to get up to this thing. So maybe a little path that goes up to here, maybe a path that goes down to this one, down to this one, and then maybe a path that kind of goes down to this one as well. Now, when it comes to paths on a mountain, remember to use switchbacks. Don't use a straight uphill incline. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's those switchbacks that are going to be the most useful. They act as a self-defense, and they make the most practical sense for walking. It doesn't make sense to have a path that goes straight up the mountain. That's just way too much work. You would switch back. You'd go one this way, this way, slowly. That way you could decrease the angle of the path by creating switchbacks. So just remember, switchbacks instead of straight lines that go straight to something, unless the incline is not that great. So just kind of remember those things when you're putting your mountain road structure together. Now I'm going to select pretty much all of these lines right here that I used. Press shift action, select all of them. There we go. Select all of these lines right here. Make sure that I have them all selected. I'm going to select all these. I'm going to group them. I'm going to call it mountain. Create, and then I'm going to take, oopsie, I missed a line right here. My mistake. We'll undo that and make sure that I select this one as well. There we go. Group, call it mountains. Okay. Now that I've got that, now I can just lock the mountains. Just make sure that that is locked. And then I can go ahead and select. I want to lock. It's not locking. There we go. Okay. I want to select all those lines as well. So I'll go in and turn off everything and just click this lines right here. We'll only select the lines. And then I'm going to group that. And I'm going to call it just the sketch or guide, whatever you want to call it, okay? Sketch or guide. There you go. All right, that looks good. So now we have that sketch there. And that's the great thing is that that sketch can change. You can go with any kind of layout that you want. The thing is the city should be somewhat practical in a sense that there is a beginning and there's kind of an end to the city as well. So you start up the switchback, you move your way up the 2 levels or 1 level. That first level might be where, like I said, some barracks. You don't need that other level right there, that small sliver. You could just have a switchback that goes up to the main section. And then in that main section, you'll have the majority of layouts. Yeah, you can go with layouts. The majority of them, remember, that is where the majority of the residential is going to be. And make sure that there's access, a main route that gets to those sections. The route does not have to be a straight line. You could have the route be winding as much as you want, and it really depends on how much military strategy you want to put into it as well, because if you wanted to keep the city extra safe, you could build the main route in a way that kind of hampers the movement of military troops and things like that. So that's just something that you have to think about. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I want to do too much planning because, you know, the thing is that if you spend all this time thinking too much about something, the amount of things that you have to do becomes overwhelming, and then you feel overwhelmed, and then you don't want to continue with it. So if you start with just the bare bones of the city first before putting on all the meat of those bones, it kind of makes sense to just start with the basic questions that you have, start with the basis access, the overall layout, how many blocks there are, and then from there, again, you can expand. So it's always best to start small and then build on top of that small, so that way you don't get discouraged, because believe me, you will. Cities are time consuming. They take a lot of time, and so starting small instead of big is going to help you, again, from getting discouraged. So start with that. Now for now, I think I'm going to call it good. It's 3:40. We got a good long 40-minute one. In the next episode, we're actually going to be creating all of the walls for all of these sections, the texture that we're going to use for the walk. We're going to put down all the roads, and then we're going to put down some tiers so that we can kind of show that there's multiple levels of this city, because a lot of cities might seem flat. Because it's a mountain city and there's a lot of cliff edges, we want to make sure that that city looks like there's a sense of verticality to it. So we'll be covering that in the next stream. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm looking forward to the next stream. Don't forget to go into the top of the chat and check out all those links. You want to join our Discord. You want to give us suggestions about future content. You want to join our YouTube channel, where there is so much content that will help you and get you started. So go check all those things out. And then also don't forget, on our Discord, we have a masterclass Monday stream where we cover some of the more power user stuff. We have a perspective battle map stream coming up, I believe, in 2 weeks. Or coming up, yeah, about 2 weeks. It's going to be covering those perspective battle maps. So I'm looking forward to that. So thank you, everyone. Please stay safe and healthy. Stay cool out there. It's getting hot. And Auf Wiedersehen. I'll see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.